Uh, Malcom Worby, will you introduce yourself? We know that FIG searched globally to find an architect who could design the school buildings and arrange the school campus. So tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and how you came to be involved in this project.
Well, my name is Malcom Worby, as you say. That's a huge question to ask me, Jean, because we could be half an hour just talking about that. As you know, I've designed buildings in various parts of the world. In this particular case, I think the referral was based on the fact that I've designed buildings throughout Africa, and mostly in a sort of commercial ilk, or as in this case, a school. And John was doing some work for the University of Stellenbosch and asked Professor Mark Swilling if he could recommend anybody that knew about sustainable building, sustainable architecture, who would be suitable for doing a project in Central Africa. And amongst others, Mark recommended me because I'd done a lot of work for the University of Stellenbosch and had worked quite closely with Mark Swilling over a period of years. And so I was interviewed amongst the others, and actually John and I hit it off, and we found that we had very much had a common philosophy on the school, how it should look, what it should be like, and basically the common denominator all the way through was trying to make it as sustainable as possible and not do some, say, Western architectural equatorial forest. And so I think that sort of common thread became a common bond, and we had a very nice working relationship right from the concept on forward. And I think we're both on the same page, and there was a mutual respect for both sides of the discussion, which for me made it a lot easier. And so the things that I presented to John, he made sense to him, and vice versa. And so it was a challenge, and I like challenges. So
you know you like challenges, because to go off to Ibba and start a school from scratch is quite an undertaking. So tell us about when you first arrived, what the site looked like, and your initial discussions with Bridget Nagamoro and Chief Severio and Paramount Chief, for example, and others.
Well, initially when we arrived, it was just all not quite equatorial forest, but it was a dense forest. I mean, it was almost impenetrable. We had to hack our way through. And we met Bridget there at Ibba, and she generously offered to give a portion of the land that we now have for the development of the school. And we walked up and down, and we then recruited 2 men with machetes so that we could go in and find out what the lay of the land was inside. And we found that it was relatively flat in areas, which made it a feasible project. And so that's where it started. Chief Severio actually came along later because John and I were concerned that there wasn't enough land to put the school on as we hoped, especially as a portion of the Nagamoro land actually was a small ravine that ran along the side of the site, which meant that we couldn't build on perhaps a quarter of it. So it reduced us significantly. Chief Severio was the chief who owned the land around the Nagamoro land, and so Bridget Nagamoro and I went and had a chat with Chief Severio, and he was very supportive, and he and I got on very well. and so it was, again, a very positive experience. And we walked out from his tukul along the road, and he pointed out with his stick, which tree the land could go from to which tree it could go to in all 4 corners. So that's how we ended up with the amount of land that we initially started with, which as we know, is round about 80 acres to start with, and subsequently has increased.
Great. And so you talked about the importance of having a sustainable school, environmentally sustainable. Tell us a bit about what were the principles that you talked about with community leaders. What kind of school?
Well, on all my projects in Africa, especially community type, I discuss it with the local people involved and explain what we want to do and the concept behind it, and try and get as much input from them as possible, but at the same time gently leading them into the sustainable building principles and why we do certain things. And this is done in almost a sort of sort of junior school fashion, where you're sort of teaching, say, okay, now here we have this piece of land, and which way does the wind come from? And they'll say, oh, it comes from over there. Well, do we want the front of the building facing the wind? Is that good or not? And you lead, which way does rain come from? And again, do you want a long side of the building or the short side of the building facing the rain? And now, oh no, the short side. And well, and the sun, how do we want to deal with it? Surely, the sun is very hot in the west and the east, first things in the morning, last thing in the evening. Which would be the best side of the building to be facing, at the long side or the short side? Or the long side. Well, why would you want to do that? Because that's an awful lot of sun coming on the whole building. Oh yeah, that's true. Maybe the short side then. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Let's go with the short side. And so we then developed the principles of the buildings running east to west. And so it then comes, well, so we've got the sun overhead, so how are we going to keep the buildings cool? Because obviously it's still going to get hot. So we then discuss roof ventilation, verandas, things to shade, so leaving trees around the buildings to give shade, and so that they have a concept of trying to keep the building ventilated as possible.
Very interesting. And you involved local people in the building as well, didn't you? Working with builders.
Just to go back to the architecture, Jean, sorry.
Sure.
What I wanted to do with it was to try and preserve somewhat the cultural aspect of the South Sudan architecture, which basically are adobe mud brick huts, which of course is very difficult to do for a school and met with considerable opposition, because especially Bridget wanted more of a Western style school. And which I can understand, because it's a sort of form of upliftment. And however, I didn't want to do a cement block school, and because cement block is not conducive to keeping buildings cool at all. And so managed to persuade her away from that and to use local bricks, because they're made out of clay and provided employment for local people in Ibba. So what I ended up coming up with was more of a colonial vernacular, because for all the faults of colonialism, which we won't go into, one of the things that they did get actually quite right was how to build buildings to keep them cool in a tropical climate. And that, coupled with the fact that the British were in that part of Sudan as it was, there are a number of those vernacular buildings still present in Ibba and in Yambio, Maridi. And so by doing that, I felt that it was still in keeping with the local architecture, yet was meeting the desires of the locals to uplift the sense of building in the school. And so I was very happy to do that. I did get them to compromise on doing outdoor study areas out of mud brick with thatch, because I explained to them, once they lost their cultural heritage, of which that form of architecture is, you won't get it back. And it's important, in my opinion, that in the school, the girls are aware that their cultural architectural heritage is as important as that of the Western vernacular. And so by including the mud brick, mud plastered, thatch roof buildings, it was a form of accepting that as a viable form alongside the others. So it's not like ours is good, yours is bad. It's like it's all good and it all serves a purpose. And so we do have outdoor teaching areas, one of which was the kitchen, which is now being restored back to an outdoor teaching area, which is going to do that, and we will do one or two more. And we did it somewhat with the dining room assembly hall, in fact that it's all open. It's very much modelled on traditional style of building, so we put the tin roof rather than a thatch roof on it. But it is all open with the low walls, much like the church was for Bishop Wilson, not the new one, the old one. And so that I wanted to incorporate as much of that as possible. So there was a sense of relationship between the existing and the middle, and incorporating some of the modern as well.
Great.
Makes sense. Yeah.
This is so fascinating. I'm sure we'll need to interview you on future occasions about this. But just to finish up, tell us a bit about some of the buildings that have been built over the last year and what there is still to go before the plan is complete.
Yeah, let me answer the question which I didn't answer about using local.
Oh, yes.
Within the same context of that. One of my mantras is that skills training is vitally important, so that if we come in with the skills and knowledge, it is imperative that we uplift people in the local area by providing them with work to teach them skills and trades. And part of my agreement with FIGS and John was that I would do it on the condition that we used it as a skills training exercise to help uplift and include the people from the local community. And John 100% agreed, 100% supportive, so it was a non-issue. In fact, we've strived to make sure that we do complement the number on site with local suppliers, local I would say unskilled labourers, with the idea that we'll upskill them to semi-skilled or even skilled in some cases. So we bought all our bricks, for example, they're all locally made of clay, fired clay, and they've been used throughout the buildings, every single building. And so what that has allowed us to do is to teach local people how to do bricklaying. So they now have a skill. We've managed to get some semi-skilled in carpentry and finish work, which has been great. We've used a local plumber, local electrician. And so again, the idea was to give back into the community, to include the community in the school whilst it was being built. So they felt the school was part of the community and the community felt part of the school. And at the same time, in a very impoverished area, especially with high unemployment, this gave a number of people an opportunity to uplift themselves and to gain knowledge and experience. So that did work really well and continues to work. And our builder, Joseph Anzetti, his brief is that he must have a certain percentage of local workers on site, which he has absolutely adhered to 100%. So he brings in a basic crew from Uganda who are skilled, and all the unskilled and semi-skilled are from the local area. So I'm very happy with that.
And it also fulfills what FIGS is trying to do, which is not just build a school, but make the school a source of social and economic development in the locality. So it's a brilliant way of doing that. Yes,
and it has worked. Definitely. Having worked 14 years in Africa, in all parts of Africa in various countries, it is vitally important to break down the stigma of the white person coming in and telling us what to do. And it is a problem, and it's, the first year or so living and working in Africa, you're blissfully unaware, but it comes to you and it sort of smacks you right between the eyes that you're actually getting it all wrong. And if you want to work with people in Africa, it is vital that you include them. And because their desire is to learn, to have the knowledge in order to be able to do what an educated person from the West does. And so I learned that lesson very, very quickly. I think the first job I ever did, I was reminded in no uncertain terms. And so ever since then, it's I've changed my outlook, and I totally understand it. And actually, it's worked to everyone's benefit. So yeah.
Great. And then just to finish up, tell us about a little bit then about the buildings that have gone up during this last year while the school's been closed, and also what's still to be built in order to complete the plan.
Yeah, well, we're actually getting there. Last year was very positive as far as buildings, because the year before, obviously, nothing got done because of COVID. No travel, no supplies, and supplies are extremely difficult to get in there. I mean, there's nothing really locally made apart from the bricks. Try and transport anything in really has to come from Uganda. You can get some stuff from Juba, you can get some stuff from Yambio, but inevitably it came from Uganda to start with. We've tried to support the suppliers in Yambio as well, for obvious reasons. But with COVID, obviously, we couldn't get anything in. The logistics are just horrendous. And as you know, the roads are worse than the logistics. And so this past year has been fantastic, because we've managed to build a whole new kitchen, storeroom, workers, toilets, washrooms, changing rooms, which is all part of one building, a new 4 classroom senior school block, and we've also put in another dormitory. So we're now up to 6 out of the 7 dormitories. We've got a new kitchen with the latest local technology cooking, and yeah, so it's all looking very good. We've upgraded the solar, so we're upgrading the water supply as well right now. And so it's actually been very, very positive. And again, despite the odds, the builder has done an amazing job and on time. So I'm very pleased. He's a very easy guy to work with. We've now been working for probably 10 years. So we both there aren't any problems because we talk about them. And so it just doesn't happen. So he's very good and very efficient. I'm actually very pleased. We've been very lucky. It could have been completely the opposite.
That is so encouraging to hear about all those buildings. And what's on the agenda for this coming year then, in terms of building?
We're almost, sorry, Jean, we're almost there. We probably have 2 years worth to go, just because of, again, the logistics tend to slow everything down. Upcoming, we want to do a science building, and it's science/arts, which is a 3 large classroom building, and because there is a need for that too. We have 1 more dormitory to do, and that will finish off the dormitories, so we can get the full complement. We need to put in some more water storage, because obviously more girls, more water, more need, and so we'll do water tower with more water storage. We need to get the clinic done, and that will have a live-in nurse there as well. And so that, again, the design of that was, like all our buildings now, is done closely with the staff at IGBS. So they all have their input. So we are designing what they see their needs are, as well as what we recognize the needs to be. And so we actually come up with designs now that everybody's happy with. And then we need to do the administration building, which will be where the head teacher's office, the accounting office, there'll be obviously a meeting room, staff room, staff toilets and little kitchenette and things. So, because right now they're using one of the classrooms and we cannot, obviously in the long term, do that. And then finally, we're going to do a little chapel meditation center. And we'll pretty well wrap it up. I mean, we've got a few sort of long drop, as they call VIP toilets to do. Not quite sure why they're called that, but I might say something about their VIPs. Yeah, so we're almost there. And obviously these are fairly big budget items, so we can't do them all this coming year. But I know we're definitely slated to do the science building, science/arts building, also the final dormitory, and get them more water and more solar on board, so everything's running efficiently. And so hopefully in 2023 we can do the administration building, yeah, maybe the clinic. I mean, it's again really depends on funding. I mean, the clinic is very necessary, the dormitory is very necessary, and the admin building will be very necessary.
Yes.
The chapel is last on the list, and I'm hoping we can do a local vernacular for that as well, and that will be the cherry on the cake for me. But that's where we are. So, I mean, we've come a long way. We have some roads to put in to out of the central part of the school, so they all go around, but it's starting to become minor things at this point. We're getting all the pathways put in this year. That was from last year's budget, and yeah, we're getting there.
Great. And a school farm longer term?
Well, that one, you know, is outside the sort of architectural realm, really. It's somehow we did have a plan probably about 5 years ago for a location on that, and there's been humming and hawing locally as where the best place is. It's still on the agenda because from day one it was always our intent to be self-sufficient as far as possible with food, and more so now because the logistics and the price of food locally is horrendous. So again, it's on the agenda. I believe, talking to John earlier, that it is something we want to try and achieve this year. I think we're going to have serious discussions as to where the best place is, because obviously there's security, safety issues and water issues that we need to make sure are all met. We can't just say, oh, well, we'll do it over there, because it won't work that way. Obviously the terrain needs to be right, the soil needs to be right, and it's not all good soil conducive for growing crops. I mean, a lot of it's just marram, which is sort of a reddish gravel. It's great for roads, but not so great for growing. So we're going to have a serious look at the best way to get some sort of topsoil on that, so we can get some decent produce growing. And I think the chickens and the goats are also coming along, and we've had discussions about that. So yes, I think by the end of 2023 we're going to be very, very close to John and my perception of what our achievements might be. So it's which is actually very exciting, because it's, when you look at that sort of bit of equatorial forest, it was like, oh my goodness, what have we done? What have we signed up for? And it's I'm thrilled with it, to be honest. It's been a very exciting project. It's been a very rewarding project right across the board. I mean, not just for me personally, to have the opportunity to design something like this, which is really a once in a lifetime. I mean, how many people get a chance to go into South Sudan, the equatorial forest, and design a girls' boarding school from scratch? I mean, it's really, for me, been a wonderful experience, and I met some lovely people, worked with some wonderful people, and continue to do so. And I'm proud of the achievements of FIGS and IGBS. I think it's happened, and the odds were definitely stacked.
It's been a long and difficult project, and it's so lovely to see all the architecture really supporting girls learning and teachers living, and helping the community as well. So Malcom, I think we're going to stop there for now, but we will need to come back to you to talk further, because there's so much richness in what you have to say, your ideas, your experiences of working with the local community. So thank you very much. And
it's been a pleasure, Jean. No, thank you for the opportunity. I mean, I must say it's been a wonderful experience, very humbling at times, very exciting most of the time, exasperating on occasion, but that's all part and parcel of doing work like this. And actually that's what makes it fun, because if it was all too easy, it wouldn't be fun. So, but and thank you too for all your support and input. I'm very grateful.